Hi, I'm Sonia Jante.
And I'm Kimberly Lane.
And I'm Tom Henschel, and together we are Unlocking Leadership. We're three experienced executive coaches with very different disciplines. In every episode, we take a question from a client and we provide key insights to address their challenge from our different perspectives. It's a holistic approach to understand challenges and opportunities. So we're going to dive right in. We have a question today from Ethan in San Diego. And here's what he writes. He says, I am the CEO of a mid-sized company. My leadership has been affected by the unending uncertainty of the past 18 months. Yeah, amen, Ethan. I'm so sorry. Who hasn't been affected by that, right? Ethan continues, the two areas I'm concerned about are creating a culture that achieves high engagement from the employees and defining a strategy that is nimble. Coaches, your advice? Sonia, since you are our strategy guru, I am just going to hand this right to you. So you want to kick us off here?
Thank you. So, Ethan, thank you so much for the question. And the first thing I want to acknowledge you for is recognizing that this whole uncertainty has affected your leadership. So you're able to look in the mirror and understand what is going on so that you're not expecting to be the superhero. And right now, we're all having to face our weaknesses, our challenges in new ways. The good thing is that with all of the information out there, it's become very safe to be more vulnerable and to be more raw, if you will, about what's going on and what we're all experiencing, because you can't gloss over it. So let's start with the employee engagement one. Later on, after we've had a round, I will go into the Nimble strategy part. So the first thing to think about is so how do we define employee engagement? And in general, it is about the connection, both personally, intellectually, and from a heart perspective, that an individual has towards their job, their team, and their organization. And so potentially you might want to take a look at, so what was the kind of employee engagement that you had in your firm prior to all of this uncertainty? Would you say that it was, how were you measuring it? What were you rewarding? What were people responding to? And the reason I say this is because if you had a foundation that was very strong, the likelihood that you have a lot to build from is pretty high. And so it may be about making some adaptations and potentially taking it to a new level. There may be some conversations that happen now that would not have happened before because everybody's learned to do Zoom from their home and people know about more personal stuff than they ever did. But the thing to look at is, what do you want it to be? Because you are the CEO and you get to be the one that puts together the vision, the design of what you want to create. And so one of the things to look at is, do you have any kind of an idea about that? Are there specific companies or organizations that that you look at their culture and you go, I would like to have more of that? Because this is the perfect time for reinvention. Once you have some of that idea, don't do it alone. This is the time to bring in your top team. And maybe it's not just the immediate leaders that report to you. It might be finding a couple of thought leaders throughout the organization and creating a safe environment for everybody to be in the invention room together in creating what you want it to look like in the future. I'll pass it on now to whoever wants to go next.
I will go next. Ethan, great question. And as a person who wrote Connections Change Everything, connections, engagement, empowering your people, inclusivity is just really my heart space. And the part of human-centered leadership that I think is so important. By you actually wanting to bring high engagement into your organization, you are actually defining your strategy to be nimble. And let me explain that. So by being high on employee engagement, now I'm assuming, maybe something's happening where everybody's going back to the office now. Great opportunity to redefine your culture and to put steps in place to create high engagement. Maybe you incorporate some members of your team to be part of that. I don't want to call it necessarily a task force, but a group that's really focused on building high engagement. And what I like to say is it's the soft stuff that makes the hard stuff work. So if you, as Sonia mentioned, if you start bringing vulnerability, allowing for conversations where people can talk about uncertainty or unpredictability, or you speak up and say, you know what, we're back in the office, but I feel a little awkward, uncomfortable, and a little fuzzy having these in-person conversations, right? And go around the room and ask, how does everybody else feel about being in the office? How does everybody feel about next year? So I think you asking questions and you personally voicing your own possibly fears or anxiety, it creates a safe space to be vulnerable. So what happens from that point? You start creating a culture where people feel safe to express themselves, right? They start to feel that they can say or challenge or status quo, if you will, and maybe even can approach you because you started building a trusting relationship to express their fears, right? As a result of that, when things start to happen where things are going sideways or a crisis or uncertainty starts to happen, because everybody feels safe to be together, they're more empowered to work as a team to work through that crisis. So you now are more nimble as an organization and as a department. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. But I really think you're on the right road by just starting with the whole employee engagement and allowing for vulnerability, empathy, and open conversations. And I'll also touch base on what Sonia said. It's not the time to pretend you're the expert. You can't do it alone. So enlist your team, enlist some other experts in the field. Start helping by having workshops, possibly. There's a way to just start doing that in your team meetings, and you're on your way to being a little bit more nimble. Tom?
I love the fact that you connected those two, Kimberly. That's great. That's really terrific. I was thinking of them very separately, strategy, which I don't wade in too much, and this idea of engagement. So Ethan, I want to give you an idea about engagement and see what you think about it. This idea comes from the Gallup organization. The Gallup organization has been looking at workplace satisfaction since the 1930s. So they've got a lot of data, right? And what they have found is that people who stay in their job the longest and report the highest job satisfaction can answer 3 questions affirmatively. 1, do you have a best friend at work? Yes or no? And the people who are really satisfied and highly engaged say yes. Do you get to do something every day at work that you love? Yes or no? And people who are highly engaged get to say yes. Mm-hmm. And the last one, does my boss have my back? Yes or no? Mm-hmm. And people who are highly engaged answer yes. So the first question I want to ask you, Ethan, is however big your direct report team is, do those people, if I went and talked to them, do they feel you have their back? Mm-hmm. And what could you do to make sure that they do? Or if some of them don't, what could you do to change that? But also, I think you could begin talking to those people, your direct reports, about their people. Are those people feeling like, the VPs, the people who report to you, have their back? And to begin just to think about that, I think it's going to create engagement on the direct report level to you, right, between you and your team, but also then begin to create engagement from them down. So that's a thought for you. It's not really an action, but it's a thought. Yeah. But Sonia, can I just say, I am dying in suspense here. I really want to hear what you have to say about strategy.
I am going to go into strategy right after I do add one little bit based on what you brought up, which I think is so important about do you love what you do? Mm-hmm. And so I think the responsibility of a leader, you being the CEO, this is your company, is do you onboard people well, and do you make sure that you have the right people in the right seats? Because if you want to be nimble, you've got to have people that are very good, very capable in the functions that they lead. Because these are times in which we actually need people that are very experienced and solid in a specific discipline. We are living in very transformative times. And the thing that I emphasize to everybody right now is there is no going back. So we are going to move forward. The question is, how are we going to move forward? Are we going to have to be kicked into forwardness? Are we going to bounce into it? Or are we going to help design it? And so being nimble traditionally is that you're quick and you can flex and you can pivot. So that's what everybody now needs to be able to do. To the extent that somebody is knowledgeable in their field, they'll have greater confidence about the kind of information and how they connect the dots of what is changing in the landscapes out there. And sometimes you also need to look at some thought leaders and some different books. There's a book I do want to give a little bit of a shout out to. It's called Leading Transformation: How to Take Charge of Your Company's Future. It was written by 3 authors. And one of the things that I like about this book is it was 3 authors. One is a professor at Harvard, actually at INSEAD in Paris. So he's all about innovation, but he's done some work with Harvard. Another one is a person who actually has their own business and is all about innovation and new connections. And the third is somebody who comes from the science world who looks at neuroscience and how is it that we connect the dots and all of that. And in the book, it actually walks you through the different steps of transforming a company. So the likelihood that your industry is under transformation, therefore your company as a participant in that industry is going to go through the transformation. Then let's put together, if you will, a game plan. And when I recommend a particular book or tool for people to use, it would be one that not only you read, all of the leaders that are going to participate with you are going to read, and potentially have somebody come out to facilitate that, because then there will be an opportunity for people to say, well, this is what I understood, or this is the part I like. And then we can actually put together an agenda that makes sense. Prior to 2020, whenever I did any kind of a transformation workshop with a top leadership team, it was always a 2-day deal. And I would say the first day, we're getting a lot of the basics out on the table, both the language, the focus, getting to know each other, creating the dynamics. And the second day is when you actually roll up your sleeves and really put together a plan. When you do that, you actually have situations that I'm sure all of us have facilitated where an organization was able to put together the goals to get acquired if that's what they wanted to do, to go public if that's what they wanted to do, to enter new markets if that's what they wanted to do. So there is a lot of possibility, and that in itself creates tremendous nimbleness.
I'm going to add to that too. I agree, Sonia, in the essence that you need to make sure you've hired top individuals in their space, in their field, but those top individuals have vision and insight to the future proactively, but you have to be able to put them together in a room, and they have to be able to meld and mesh together to work collectively. Because we're better as collaborators. We build better buildings if we are working together than trying to do it ourselves. So I think too, by having regular meetings where your top leaders are put together in the room to proactively discuss possibilities, looking down their path to what they see in the future from their perspective, and collectively as a team, you have open, challenging discussion. I think practicing that nimbleness during these meetings on a regular basis will keep you nimble. I don't know necessarily that all of a sudden in a year when something comes up, you can all of a sudden turn on nimbleness. So I think by having regular cohesive meetings that give everybody, every one of your top leaders, an opportunity to dialogue and present and to challenge what's going on, so that everybody starts getting in a mode of strategically thinking nimbly or proactively, or what's coming down the line. So they're thinking, what's happened in the past, assessing the current situation, have enough vision to sense potentially what's a threat, and collectively challenging each other on that. So I think there's a lot of content we just all kind of jumped on here. There's a lot of ways we can go with this, but Tom and Sonia, anything else you want to add for wonderful Ethan?
I have a question for the two of you. So I've heard both of you say, Sonia, where you started this whole episode was this idea of being intentional, that Ethan needs to really think about what kind of company he wants to create. Yeah. So on one level, there's this idea of, hey, you're the CEO. This is your job. Figure out your strategy. I've also heard both of you talk about this idea that this is a team effort, that this is the time to bring people in. And I'm wondering, are these mutually exclusive? Like if Ethan were kind of going wait, because to me, if I were Ethan, I might hear those, that they can't exist in the same space, right? Either I'm going to make the strategy and lead, or I'm going to do this kind of collaborative leadership. Do they cancel each other out? What do you think?
I don't think they cancel each other out, but I think there's a couple of, so I'll go back and ask Ethan, the question is, are you in the right seat? Like, why did you take on that role? Is that the role you really wanted to have? And as a result of, in some cases, when we are the CEO, we either inherit the particular business plan, agenda, what the board has discussed, and we're there because we're a good implementer of an already existing strategy. Sometimes we're the ones who are the strategic leaders, the one with the ideas. So I don't know which one you are, but if you are one that's a good implementer, then the collaboration with the team becomes something that you can step into very quickly and very easily. If you're the one that's got the strategy, and again, the only reason I say it's important to look at collaboration more so today than any other time is all of the changes that have unfurled have been viewed from different perspectives by different people. And we need to have more input than we traditionally have, because I don't know of anybody right now who can say to me, I know for sure that we will not be talking about COVID in 2023. I don't know anybody that can give me like a for sure definite thing. So we need, one of the things that I think about that happened that we all can acknowledge was Nimble and it taught us a lesson, was when we went into full shutdown and yet we still wanted to eat. And we still wanted to, if we potentially support some of the restaurants or places that we used to go to, many of those, businesses decided to go into full takeout, or they decided to create because they still had vendors. They still had people who were supplying them with the vegetables and the whatever. So they created their own little farmers markets. That's being nimble in the moment to support a changing environment for what the business could look like. And in some cases, today, as they've reopened, they have come to redefine what their business is and who their collaborating partners are. So that's something where reinvention is not something that happens alone. It requires data. Data may come from surveys. Data may come from individuals. Data may come from engaging with your clients. But it's not separate. Tom, I hope that answered the question, but it does require a few more answers from him.
It actually taught me something. I mean, really, that's such an interesting idea about which kind of CEO are you and how did you get in the chair and all that. And that was great, Sonia. That's a series of questions I just don't even ask. So that was great. What were you going to say, Kimberly?
No, I was just saying, you just as a CEO, you can't do it alone. There's a great book called Social, and it talks about that we have two different mindsets. One is social on, where you're aware of the relationships you have. The other one is social off. And our brains, when we're not focused on a task or, a deep, intense effort of doing something, and we are no longer focused on that task, our mind will automatically default to our relationships and how we relate to other people, any conflicts there, any challenges in it. But it also talks about that very often, so many of us choose to be in the social off mode, doing it all ourselves. And CEOs can be that way, one, because of their prestige, where they are in the organization, and probably don't have a lot of other people to be a sounding board to. But the threat to that is when you're so focused, you're actually eliminating the very things that can help you solve that problem and get there faster, i.e. be more nimble here. You need you can't be an expert in sales, marketing, operations, engineering, et cetera. You need leaders in your team to be able to have insight, to be able to put together that strategy to be nimble enough. And when you have good friends working together on a team, when a team, if you get a team that's very humble, willing to roll up their sleeves and work together and be open enough with each other to challenge each other, you're going to go extremely far. So I do think CEO can be a lonely role, but it doesn't have to be a lonely role and you doing it all yourself. That whole engagement piece, I think, comes into play in creating a very trusting environment that's open in communication, where people can truly confront issues and challenge each other and say, I don't have the answer. And as a CEO, you're not going to have all the answers. Things are changing way too quick to be able to do so. So my little 2 cents.
Yeah,
Any thoughts?
I'll just say one other thing that I think is interesting, in my opinion, culturally today. Prior to 2020, there was a possibility that as a CEO, you were operating more isolated or
Right.
with less, if you will, knowing full well that people coming to you would probably have an agenda. You know, marketing has an agenda, they want more budget, or, you know, operations has more, whatever. So you always had to be cautious about, you know, how much you listened and how much you were influenced and that kind of thing. Because we now really are having to look at things collectively as to, well, how do you see the changes that happen? Do you see that, you know, I heard today that the White House had a meeting at the, you know, in the Rose Garden, and it was about automobiles and wanting more electrical automobiles. And they had the top three vendors of autos, but Tesla wasn't there.
Yeah.
So here you have an actual organization that his whole thing is about electrical cars. So those kinds of things, we need to have all the people in the room, because there is the opportunity to really have a very robust discussion that creates the right strategy. And so that's the only thing I want to point out is, you know, the advantage of all that we've gone through is people would not think any less of you for wanting to engage more people in the conversation. And they would see that as, wow, that's a sign of a good leader.
I would definitely capitalize on that. It's a sign of a great leader, realizing you don't have all the answers, and that you're surrounding yourself with great people. Excellent. So thank you, Ethan from San Diego, for your question today. Hopefully we've given you some great insights, some great keys to improving your leadership. Our viewers and listeners, hopefully you gained great insights as well. Please leave a review if you can in the show notes. If you like the content we shared today, please like this episode as well, and share and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Unlocking Leadership, Ask the Coaches. If you have a leadership question yourself or would like to reach out to one of our coaches, please find our contact information and website in the show notes. Thanks for joining us today. Tune in next time to find the keys to unlocking your best leadership.